The death toll in the George building collapse has now increased to 17. Gift of the Givers founder Dr. Imtiaz Sooliman joins us for an update on rescue operations. Dr. Sooliman, good to speak to you. Sadly, when we converse, we know that there's trouble in the country somewhere. Walk us through your initial response, or the initial response of Gift of the Givers when the news of the building collapse broke.
Good afternoon, Hugo. It's almost standard procedure in the country that whenever a disaster happens, we get called by disaster teams, by municipalities, by local people in the area. My representative, fortunately, who lives in Sedgefield, Knysna area, got a call from the disaster people and to say that this building had collapsed around 2:09 on about 14:10 on Monday. Within 2 hours, he was on site. And what we normally do as a first line, which is standard in most cases for fire and for floods, is we support the rescue workers. Now, a lot of Gift of the Givers teams are within those rescue workers because they volunteers from the government service from throughout the country. But in the initial phase, they requested, which is standard, energy drinks, energy biscuits, energy foods, and over a period of time, of course, they require hot meals, which we provided. The other thing which they do require, and up till this morning, is still request, is safety footwear, safety boots, goggles, masks, hygiene, lip balm, Vaseline, and those kind of items. So up till this morning, we've been providing that, and they would come with some other odds and ends which would find source and get to them. Now they've asked for a special type of medical glove because of to see some of the decomposed or some of the bodies that have come up requires a special investigation. We're busy sourcing that. But that's the second part of intervention. The third part was, when they told me a building collapsed, I didn't sort of take it too seriously because I know our building standards are excellent in this country, so it couldn't be something very major. And then they sent us the pictures. And when I saw the pictures, I got horrified. I realized that this is a major crisis, and to save life in this building, you need to send in dogs. So the same evening, we arranged 3 sniffer dogs and handlers to move from Cape Town to George. They were there at 11:30 at night. They went to work immediately, and the first 4 people found alive in the building were identified by these sniffer dogs that we sent. And that also helped us understand that the basement area was sort of saved, and the rest of the building has virtually collapsed. And that if there was life, most of it would probably be found in the basement. So what we've done from Monday, we've done throughout the week, helping with drinks, food, hot meals, giving equipment and supplies, and the dogs worked 2 days ago. And then, of course, we had to look after the victims of the families of the victims. And we started providing blankets, mattresses, warm meals. And yesterday we took over in a more significant way because their diets are different. They're Malawians, they're Zimbabweans, they eat differently, they need a different diet. And in the week also, we sent in counseling psychologists to assist. So all those levels of intervention are still taking place.
Now, Dr. Sooliman, what has been the biggest challenges faced by the rescue teams on the ground? And obviously, when we talk about experience, you had a team that was in Turkey a few months ago, and that was a massive disaster. So you're pretty familiar with some of the challenges that a building collapse of this nature would have.
Yes, safety is number one. Structural, stability in the building. You have to worry both about your teams, which is priority. I make no bones about it. In this case, my teams didn't go in, but when we send teams in, their safety comes first more than the safety of the people in the building. And then whilst doing that, you have to try to see how you can take precautions in a way that doesn't harm the people inside the building. The challenge in this building was that there was 3,000 tons of concrete that fell completely to the ground, completely collapsed. And fortunately, Professor Richard Walls, who was a foremost disaster structural engineer in the country from Stellenbosch University, was on hand to give advice where to cut, where to destroy, where to rebuild, where to support. And his advice was very, very valuable in terms of seeing him on site. And he directed people, the different teams, what to do. Also, what was important was that the teams worked with discipline. There was unison in the different teams that came. There was understanding. Everybody followed the system. Everybody followed discipline. That's also critical because you will get teams, ego overrides a lot of, ego sort of takes over a lot of people's personalities and people want to do their own thing. This was, a lesson in humility, in working together, in understanding. So the crisis that you had, in terms of structural instability, it could be managed. what equipment must be brought in and when. And because there was proper leadership, it was highly successful to the point that he found somebody alive yesterday, 118 hours after the collapse of the building. It's 5 days to find somebody alive after 5 days, which has been absolutely wonderful. And to see that kind of working together. The good thing is there was no fear of gas exploding inside the building. There was no gas there. That's another challenge when you come into sites like this in major earthquake collapse. And the other advantage was this was one building. It wasn't like an entire city that had collapsed. No, and of course the crowds could be controlled. They could be put between barrier lines. There was a system. There was no being overloaded with people coming on top of you. In Turkey, all the families were coming, tugging at your pants. No, please, my brother is here. My 5 children are here. My grandfather is there. Please, can you help? Please, can you help? Everybody overwhelming you. Everybody wants you to be on their side at the same time. And that, besides being a challenge in terms of logistics, it can be a massive emotional and psychological impact on the rescue workers.
Dr. Sooliman, I'd like you just to share some insights on the level of difficulty or the intricacies of dealing with a collapsed building of this nature. Now, no, you're not a structural engineer, but you're obviously sufficiently familiar to possibly give us an opinion. Now, we're talking about, I think you talked about 3,000 tons of concrete that collapsed. Now, one would imagine that if a building is 4 or 5 stories high, that you'd have a huge mound, but we don't see a huge mound from those pictures. And that's kind of difficult to fathom. I mean, a lot of what we see is just mangled steel and obviously piles of dirt, if you will. Just what are the intricacies around a rescue operation when you've got so much tonnage of debris to deal with?
It's very, very complicated. As again, we have to compare this situation to a proper earthquake situation. This building mimics an earthquake, but it's one building. You go into an earthquake, the companies that produce or provide the earth-moving equipment, that equipment is not available. You're coming from outside countries, you can't come with severe, big or strong earth-moving equipment. You come with small hand drills, you come with machines that you can use. In this case, it was obvious that at some point, the hand drilling won't be feasible. You're going to need big cranes and big types of demolition equipment. Now, this is a very unusual case because it's only one building. What happened if there's an earthquake in entire Jordan? What would we have done then? To access all those buildings, we would have had all the equipment, we wouldn't have all the supplies, we wouldn't have had the personnel, we wouldn't have the support of the public. So in a way, we've been very, very fortunate that it was only one building and that we could get massive support from the whole community, that everybody was alive to come and assist. But in massive earthquakes, like in Turkey, in Hatay, the city was 99% demolished. It was gone. And those buildings were 12 to 15 floor high, but 5 to 7 people per flat, but over thousands of people in the building. You have the challenge of getting to the people, or first of all, moving the rubble. Turkey uses gas. Gas is the main form of a source of electricity, a source of heat and energy in Turkey. You've got to worry about gas explosions. And you've got to worry about more rubble, or the floors above you being destabilized and falling on your personnel inside. At some point, even like in George, you have to go into the basement. You have to crawl inside, put in the video cam, put in the audio machines. Because on yesterday's rescue, one of the rescue workers, as he was moving in, started getting faint sounds. And he had to go further and put the audio equipment in. Now, if the building is unstable and something moves, of course, there's no aftershocks here. That's another advantage. If an aftershock happens, the building could fall on the rescue workers, and that has happened before. So it's very, very different from an earthquake situation in that you've got a lot of backup support, a lot of equipment available. You can bring in machines from somewhere else, but you can't do that in a proper earthquake situation. And that's what helped a lot here. But at the same time, the other floors were completely smashed up with the 3,000 tons of rubble. And we knew where people survived would be in the basement or in the lift shaft, because if they could manage to get inside there, it's protected. But the miracle thing was that apparently this person was found yesterday was found on the 3rd floor. How that happened, I can't explain to you. It's just a miracle of life that this man has survived from the 3rd floor.
You're absolutely right, Dr. Sooliman, that it is indeed a miracle, and we remain hopeful, obviously, that more survivors will be found. But looking at it realistically or practically, just what are the chances that individuals will still be alive 7 days after this disaster?
Look, first of all, I don't follow the 72-hour rule, all right? because I've seen people like you've seen here. I've seen people come out alive after 8 days. In Haiti, in an earthquake that was 7.0 on the Richter scale, that wiped out 240,000 people, we saved a lady in the collapsed Catholic church. We got her on day 8, 64-year-old Enazizi. The difference is the church doesn't have 5 floors. It's just a simple single-story building. We pulled her out alive. No oxygen, no food, no water, and a fractured hip. She came out alive. Whilst I'm saying that, in Turkey it was completely different. On day 8, on the 13th of February, we pulled out a 90-year-old lady, but she was trapped in a 12-story building where it was completely pancaked, and yet she came out alive. And again, it was proven yesterday that on day 5, a person came out alive. But while saying all these positive things, the reality is that if there's no space, if the concrete has fallen on the people, the chances of further rescue or alive people is very difficult. Number one, because of 3,000 tons of concrete. Number two, I'm not too worried about the food and water. They can survive longer without food and water. Number three, if they had any ailments, medical conditions, the building collapse, if they had high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma, cardiac disease, which required medication, which they didn't take, the situation could be precarious. And fourthly, direct trauma. The people who came out, 16 of them were critically injured. One of them actually passed on in hospital 2 days ago. Head injury, crush injuries, lung injury, kidney injuries, all, special crush injuries. Without medical care, how long are they going to survive in those buildings? And that's the fear. My biggest fear is not so much about the lack of food or the lack of water. Of course, if they're in compartments where there's no oxygen, that's a challenge. But the degree of trauma caused to them, that's going to be the fear for the loss of life.